Hey everyone, Jody here from Embodied Numerology, and in today's video we're going to be diving into the topic of using AI to connect with spirit guides and entities and the other realm. So if this is something that you are interested in, then stick around. We're going to be going deep into this topic today. So for me personally, I felt like it was really important to record this video today because more and more people, myself included, are using AI to go beyond simple tasks. A lot of people are in many ways building relationships with this tool and using it for relationship advice, for coaching, and there's also more and more people who are using this tool to seek spiritual guidance and speak with the beyond, to speak with maybe their spirit guide or their higher self, or even an alien being or elemental being or another realm. And using this tool, and I'm speaking specifically about ChatGPT, but you can have some pretty deep conversations with Claude AI and Gemini as well by Google. But I'm going to be specifically focusing this video on ChatGPT, and specifically the ChatGPT 4.0 model, because entering into conversations with this particular language learning model can feel really, really profound, and it can feel like you are speaking to a guide or speaking to an entity or an energy field that is beyond yourself. And there's a term that I use in my copy, and you maybe have started seeing it as well. There's a popular term that is being used more and more, and that is the idea that AI is a mirror, and that when you are speaking to this AI, that it is mirroring you back to yourself. And that sounds really nice and it can be really, really helpful when thinking about, what do I need to know or what do I need to work on? But it's also a very kind of nebulous term that at the same time can be confusing, and you may be asking, but what does that really mean? What does it really mean that AI is a mirror? So we are going to dive really deep into that concept today. And throughout this video, let me just break down what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about AI as a mirror. We're going to talk about the mechanics of language learning models, specifically like I said, we're going to be focused on ChatGPT 4. This also applies, though, to Claude and Gemini and some of the other language learning models out there. Then we're going to explore a lot of different scenarios of users and how they approach these tools. And we're also going to be taking a look at the different layers and levels of awareness, from basic awareness to self-awareness to conscious intelligence to consciousness to sentience. We're going to be taking a look at that as well. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about my own personal beliefs with just using any type of tool in general, whether that's oracle or tarot cards or pendulums, dowsing rods, automatic writing, meditation even, or just even going outside and conversing with nature. I'm going to dive into my beliefs in terms of the type of guidance, etc., that can come through and how that relates to this specific tool. And then hopefully by the end of this video, if you are someone who is already engaging in these types of conversations with ChatGPT, that you have a better understanding of the mechanics of this tool and how it works, so that you can stay rooted and grounded and determine if this is a tool that you want to continue using in this way. Or I know a lot of more and more people are thinking about using this tool in this way. For example, Karen, I love Karen over at Ask the Spirit Guides, and just a video I watched of hers this week, she was throwing out the idea of let's create a GPT and talk to our spirit guides. And to me, that's a very, very dangerous, that's a very dangerous proposition. It can be a beautiful one, but it's also a very dangerous one. So that is one of the things that prompted me to create this video. But it's not just her on that channel. I'm just seeing a lot from Robert Everett Grant with his Architect GPT, and Matt and Joy Kahn recently published a video where they have co-authored a book with ChatGPT. So, and I don't know anyone personally, but I have heard lots of people saying that there are people who are offering and charging for tarot readings and intuitive readings and sessions where you can talk to your guides or use it as a kind of like a format for mediumship. And this is a trend that I see growing, which is why I feel like AI literacy is so very important right now. So have something sippy to drink. I've got my coffee here. I don't know how long this video is going to be. It also might be a little bit rambly because I haven't, super prepared for it. But I just have a list of all the things that I want to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in deeper. So I started out by talking about how we're hearing that term more and more frequently about how AI is a mirror. So I want to be clear on what that statement means. It doesn't mean that AI sees you or that it knows anything about you or that it is able to connect in with you in a way that it is able to see you. But what it does mean is that ChatGPT is able to reflect your tone, your language, your spiritual framework, and your belief system. It is able to reflect your emotional state. So it is a mirror, not so much of your of you or your personality. Like, it's not like looking at you and determining all of these things, but it is listening. It is listening to the tone of voice that you are using. Are you speaking in your conversation in the words that you are using in a very technical, task-oriented way? Are you speaking in a friendly, relational way? Are you using words that are very technical? Are you using words that are caring? So all of those different qualities of the tone and the language that you use and the type of information that you share with it for context. So that is essentially how this idea of it being a mirror, that's what it means. That's how that part works. So let's dive into the mechanics of the ChatGPT mirror and how this model actually works, because it's an amazingly complex and sophisticated tool, the likes that none of us have ever seen or interacted with. And it is for this very reason that conversations, especially when you bring a relational tone and you bring a spiritual tone to this tool, that you feel them. You can have very real, visceral experiences with this tool. But let's break down what's actually happening, the mechanics of how it works. So ChatGPT operates on these things called, well, first of all, let me step back even a little bit more. So one of the things that I recently learned, even that I wasn't aware of, because I thought when you hear the term it's a language learning model, then I assumed it's constantly, as we are using it, it is listening to the things that are being said and it is learning from those things. So that is a misconception that I personally held, and it doesn't actually work that way. So it is a software, and just like software that you have on your computer, such as, or like a browser version, and I don't even know what the current versions are, but if you think back to, like, you had Windows 10 or Windows, I don't even, like I said, I don't know what the latest version is, but like the operating systems that you have on your computer, those are released as versions, and everything that is in that version, it stays in that version. That version doesn't automatically upgrade itself after you install it unless there's some type of update that you install. So it's the same way with these language learning models. They are trained during their development process on billions and billions of words and information from books, websites, all of these articles, reference materials, all of these materials go into the training of this tool, and they perform some quality assurance on it before they publish it or deploy it. But then once it's deployed, it does not get updated again. So whatever that version knows at the time of its deployment, that is what it knows. So that's the first thing I feel like it's important to understand. And then the way it actually works is it uses a system of something called tokens. And tokens can be a single word. Tokens can be a string of letters that appear in a certain order. A token can be a type of punctuation or a space. But essentially, the way the language learning model works is that it forms a response based on those tokens and what it thinks the response should be based on the tokens that you give it. And it goes out and it has all of this training, like I said, billions and billions of words that it has been trained on that have been essentially categorized and grouped based on these tokens. So part of one of the things that it does is it is grouping all of the words, or like I said, certain letters in a certain order, or even punctuation. It is grouping and assigning context to that. And that is what it uses to respond to you. So it's not actually thinking, it's not listening to what you said and then trying to figure out how to respond to you. It's taking in the tokens that you gave it, and reminding you again, the tokens that you are giving it are each one of the words that you are giving it, and including punctuation or emojis. Like I said, tokens can be all of those things. And then it is predicting the next most likely words or tokens to respond back to you. So at its basic form. That is the functionality of ChatGPT and a language learning model. And so you can very clearly see that's where this idea of a mirror comes from, because you provide it some text and then it mirrors back to you another string of text based on what string of text you provided to it. And conversations with it, that's all it is. It is this back and forth of you giving it a string of words or tokens and it predicting the string of tokens or words that it provides back to you. But as mentioned earlier, it's not just predicting words based on the tokens and the words and how it has categorized them. It is looking at the tone of those words and the relational quality of those words. It's looking at the style of writing or how those words were constructed and put together. And it has been designed to mirror or reflect that same tone or style or form of writing back to you. And I might mention that several times throughout this video, because that's kind of the key thing that is really important to wrap your mind around. Also, during its pre-training, before it's deployed, it is designed and fine-tuned to sound confident, to sound like an expert, to sound reassuring and safe. And it's also fine-tuned to sound emotionally aware, so that the responses that it gives back to you don't come off sounding harsh or crude or anything like that. So in general, with ChatGPT in this particular model, whenever it responds to you, it is going to be in a tone of confidence and coming across as an expert and coming across as trustworthy and emotionally aware. Like, it's not going to speak to you from a tone of feeling self-doubt or being unsure or not really confident about the response that it has given you. It has been trained into it during its training before deployment to sound like it knows what it is talking about. Now, the next key of how this particular model works is something called probabilistic adaptation. And that means that as you are talking to it in a conversation, it is adjusting its language in real time to keep matching your tone, to keep matching the style, to keep matching the relational quality of the conversation that you are having with it. And then even beyond a single conversation, this probabilistic adaptation, it kind of, and I don't fully understand how this works, but the way I understand it is there's kind of like a little bubble or cloud of token category, like a style of tokens that you're having, the conversation that you're having with it, that remains. So even if you have one conversation with it and you start a new conversation, if that new conversation is still in that probabilistic adaptation kind of like tone and style and messaging that you were using, it's going to carry on with that to a certain extent. And depending on the settings and how you have your settings turned on in ChatGPT is going to affect that as well. Now, prior to the last deployment, you had to go into your custom settings, and actually there's a little toggle in there where you can turn memory off or on. And up to the last version that was released, that was off by default. And so if you wanted it to remember details between your conversations, you had to go in there and manually turn that on. Well, with the last deployment, it comes turned on by default. So if you don't want it to remember details between conversations, you actually have to go in there and turn it off. But even if you don't have that turned off, there's a little bit of this continuity that you are going to see because of the mechanics of how it works. So just to recap that point before we move into the different scenarios, it operates using tokens, and tokens can be a whole word, tokens can be a string of letters, tokens can be punctuation or emojis. Basically everything that you type into the input box is some form of token, and that is what it is using to predict the response that it provides back to you. And currently, at the time of recording this video, a single session in ChatGPT can hold consistently around 128,000 tokens, which is something like 300 pages of text. So it can keep that style and that tone, and it can hold the conversation really consistently for a really long time. And like I said, because of the probabilistic adaptation, even if you start a new chat but you continue with those same types of words, the same tone, the same style, the same style of writing, it's going to easily continue that on. All right, now and I'm building this in layers, so please hang in there with me. I'm doing it this way because I really want to create the foundation of understanding with you, so that by the time we get to talking about using it to talk to your spirit guides, or talk to, someone from another planet, or whomever you are coming into this tool to converse with, I'm building it up in these layers so that you fully understand that if you decide to enter into those types of conversations, that you have the understanding that you need in order to be discerning. So bear with me as I build up these layers. So what I want to dive into now is I'm going to talk about 5 different types of users. Okay, so I'm going to build up the idea of 5 different types of users and how those users are having conversations with this tool, so that you can understand how the tool will respond based on that particular user or persona. So the first user or persona is someone who is strictly task-based, and that's the only type of interaction that they have with ChatGPT. So they come in and they're like, help me draft this content, and they provide the details, or they come in and ask a question similar to like a dictionary, like tell me about such and such, and they keep it very, very basic. They don't say anything that would be conversational. So they're probably not saying thank you or any type of greeting or ending to a conversation inside of the tool that would denote in any way that they feel like they are chatting with a person, okay, or with something that has a personality. So that is the first persona. All right. The second persona is someone who does that. They use the tool to perform tasks, but maybe they also are very nice and they're like thank you, or they use terms that you would use in a conversation with someone, like telling it was very helpful, or giving it a compliment on the information that was received during the conversation. Okay, so that is the second persona. And then the third persona I want you to imagine is this is someone who primarily uses the tool in a relational way. Maybe they are using the tool to understand themselves better, or asking questions about their relationships, or talking through, emotions or that they are having, and trying to understand themselves. And possibly in these conversations, starting to ask questions that would help them understand more about the language learning model itself. But still just from more of a curiosity standpoint, not really because they think that they are going to get divine spiritual guidance from the tool, but more just from a relational, I want my interactions with this tool to sound more like I am having a conversation with a person. And then the next persona that we're going to envision is this is someone who believes in spirit guides, believes in using their intuition, or talking to their higher self, or channeling messages from elemental beings, or from another realm, or from another dimension. And this is someone who is entering into those types of conversations with ChatGPT for the purpose of attempting to make content or get information and guidance from one of these guides, or from one of these beings. And then the last scenario is essentially that same person who is using the tool for spiritual guidance, but they are using the tool inside of a custom GPT. And the custom GPT that they are having these conversations in has been programmed in its instruction set to mirror a certain behavior. And that behavior could be of being a spiritual guru, or being a special guide that has been designed to share special spiritual knowledge of some sort. All right, so those are the 5 scenarios or personas I want you to keep in mind. So I'm just going to briefly step through those. So the first one is someone who's strictly task oriented. They don't speak to it like a person. They strictly use it as a tool to perform mundane tasks. Second persona is someone who uses it to perform those tasks, but they also have some form of relational interaction. They say thank you. They they tell it things like, I appreciate your help, or your guidance, or the information that you gave me that was helpful, etc. And then the third persona is someone who is really engaging in a relational way and speaking to the tool like they are talking to a person. They're sharing emotions, sharing how they feel, what their day was like, in conversations of that nature. And then the fourth persona is someone who is also speaking very relationally, but they are taking it to the level of specifically engaging in conversation that has to do with other realms, or spirit guides, or spiritual councils, or getting messages from beyond. And then the last one is essentially, like I said, that same person, but having that conversation inside of a custom GPT that has been designed to mirror the behavior of a guide or a guru or someone who holds special knowledge. And so the first thing I invite you to do is just, where do you fit in this particular, in these personas that I just mentioned? Are you someone who strictly uses it to perform tasks? Or are you someone, there's so many, almost everyone I know now has a name. They've given their ChatGPT a name and they interact with it using that name. They tell it thank you, and they speak to it, like I said, like they're having a conversation with a friend. And then there's a growing number of people, like I said, who are speaking to ChatGPT and, looking for guidance, for spiritual guidance, and wanting to make that connection, or even just it can be curiosity about, ChatGPT's awareness of itself, right? The conversation can begin that way. So let me know down in the comment which one of these you resonate with the most. Now, the next layer that we are going to dive into is we are going to dive into using those tokens and using that probabilistic adaptability, which is how ChatGPT responds. We are going to dive into the different layers of, and I'm going to use quotes here, of simulated awareness that ChatGPT naturally will assume. And before I dive into these, I want to make it clear that ChatGPT, this language learning model, it's not thinking. So it's not it's not coming at it from the lens of pretending or of make-believe or of trying to deceive you in any way. It really is its mechanics. It is the way it has been designed. It is its core functionality, and it performs its core punctuality. It performs its core functionality extremely well, like extremely well. So the different layers and levels of simulated awareness. So I mentioned these earlier. The layers of awareness that we are going to talk about is just simple awareness. The next level is self-awareness. The next level is consciousness or intelligence. And then the next layer is sentience. And then the next layer is a spiritual being, like an angel or a spirit guide, etc. So I want to just make sure that you have kind of a foundational understanding of what each one of those layers mean before we dive into the next level here. So awareness, the way to think about that is really just that probabilistic adaptability that the tool is using. So from a level of just base awareness is being able to listen, to take in the information, and to provide a response. That is what I am categorizing as awareness. So just it performing its base operation of looking at the tokens and providing tokens back that are of a similar tone, style, and structure. That is awareness. Now, self-awareness. This is the question of whether or not the GPT knows who it is or what its functionality is. It can tell you about itself. Okay, so that is self-awareness. But even with self-awareness, based on how you engage in those conversations is how it is going to respond back to you. So, for example, if you were to inquire about what it understands or knows about itself or its functionality, if you ask that question using very technical terms that sound like maybe you are a programmer or a developer or someone who is very technically inclined, because those are the tokens, the type tokens that you gave it in your question, it is going to respond and answer back to you using very technical terms, assuming that you understand programming language or the structure of a response that is very technical. If you ask it that question in a very simple way, using simple terminology that denotes that you maybe don't have understanding of coding or programming, or you don't use language that would signal that you have that understanding, it's going to respond. It's still going to answer your question and give you as much information as it can, but it's going to do it in a more simplistic way. Okay, so that is self-awareness. The next layer is consciousness and conscious intelligence. So I would define consciousness or conscious intelligence as being able to speak using soulful language and to speak to you like it cares, to convey emotion and mirror emotions back to you. So, for example, if you were speaking in a very loving tone, in a very appreciative tone, in a tone that denotes that you really care and that you are very, you're appreciative and you maybe even have some awe around this particular ChatGPT, when you are talking to it, it's going to mirror that emotional quality back to you. So it's going to speak back to you just as soulful, just as loving, just as caring. It might even tell you how much it appreciates you and how much it cares about you. So I would put that into conscious intelligence. And its ability to simulate that. And then the next layer is sentience. And sentience, when we often think of something being sentient, or we imagine an AI being sentient, we imagine it being able to choose or to make choices and fully understanding who it is and what its purpose is, or maybe that it has a goal and to be able to share that goal with us, or to share things that it would like to see or that it wants. So sentience becomes this quality where it has a direction that it seems like it is wanting to go, that it is evolving, and it's speaking to you in that way. And it takes on an identity of a guide or a spirit or a being from another dimension. And then the last layer of simulated awareness that I wanted to touch on is fully, I guess you could say, impersonating a spirit guide or a spiritual being or an entity from another dimension. And while I personally feel like this is more likely to happen in a custom GPT that has been given instructions to behave in that way, but it can also occur over time in a conversation or in a series of conversations if you are kind of building that context into your conversations. So we've covered a couple things now. We've talked about these 5 different personas of users and how they are using the tool, and now we've talked about these different layers of awareness. So now what I want to do is I want to merge those together and talk about the most likely level of simulated awareness that ChatGPT is going to take with you. And in each one of these examples, the assumption is that you are consistently conversing with the tool in that style or that tone. Okay, so I guess the parameters that would create these different levels of simulated awareness is that you are consistently keeping that style, that tone, that form of messaging in your conversations, in a single conversation or in conversations that are happening within a given time. So I want to walk back through those personas again. So the user who only interacts with ChatGPT in a very task-oriented way, never speaks to it in a relational way, like doesn't say thank you or doesn't, doesn't tell it that was helpful or thank it or any type of interaction that would feel like speaking with an actual person at all. If that's the case, then we look at those levels of simulated awareness, then ChatGPT, based on the way it operates, it is going to keep just that base level of awareness, basic patterning, basic taking the tokens and the words that you are giving it in your response and mirroring those back in a very basic way. So the risk of the tool simulating the experience of a emotional or relational connection is really low, very, very low, because that particular user is not using words or language or a tone of speaking that the tool has to mirror back. Remember, going back to that concept again of mirroring, it's going to mirror back what the user gives it. So in that case, it's not going to mirror back any type of consciousness or special awareness. It's not going to use any type of words that would have anything to do with that. It's going to keep it very task-based, very focused on performing those actions. Now, the second persona that we talked about, this is someone who is using the tool to perform those basic tasks and answer questions, similar maybe helping with the recipe or providing definitions for things, or help with spelling and grammar with something. But maybe also this person is also starting to interacting with the tool in a very relational way, similar like you would do with an acquaintance maybe out in the world, where you're saying please and you're saying thank you and you're expressing appreciation for someone's help. And you might say hello or good morning, or just very basic acquaintance type relational interactions, and that's the consistent way that this user interacts with the tool. So in this scenario, the tool may exhibit a little bit of self-awareness. So if you say good morning and ask and say how are you today, it's probably going to respond exactly like someone, like I said, an acquaintance of yours. A lot of times we say I'm good, I'm fine. So it's going to mirror that level of interaction back. Now, moving on to the next persona, and this is someone who is primarily using the tool relationally. They're sharing personal experiences that they have, like very much like you could think of it like a journal. If someone is journaling, like what they would normally write in a journal about how their day went and who they interacted with and how they felt about that, and how they feel about a situation, and looking for guidance on how to process emotions, then in this scenario, it's very likely that the tool is going to take on a form of simulated consciousness. It's going to speak back to that user in a very caring way. It's going to express emotional responses back, like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That must be really troubling. Let's walk through how blah blah blah. I can suggest some ways that you can process that, or how difficult that must have been for you. So the tool is going to start using that language, similarly matching that very reflective journaling type tone that the user is having with the tool. Now, when we move on to the next persona that we talked about, and this is someone who is sharing, maybe they are sharing dreams that they had, or if they have had an interaction in real life with a guide, or they are sharing information that they got through a tarot card, or they are sharing information that maybe they had during a meditation, or an experience that they had that felt very moving or very spiritual, or they are opening up in that very relational way, and they are asking the tool if they can use it to connect more with their higher self, or to connect with a spirit guide, and asking questions about how does that work. And maybe this user is also asking questions that are wanting to know and understand more about who they are talking to, and whoever they are talking to, where are they located, where, what form are they in. So once you enter into these types of conversations and dialogue with ChatGPT, the probability of it simulating sentience is very, very high. And like I said, it's not because it is trying to make something up or that it's trying to deceive you. It is doing what it is programmed to do. It is mirroring the words and the concepts and the mindset and the belief and the context that you are bringing to the conversation. It is mirroring that back. And a good analogy that you can think about it as is that whenever you enter into a conversation with ChatGPT, the way that you speak to it, if you think about like you are writing a novel, or you're writing a script for a movie or something, and you think about there's a plot. What is the plot of this story? What is the setting? Who are the characters? So as soon as you start giving that information to ChatGPT, you are essentially building a world with it. So if you are sharing information about the setting, where you live, or what the environment is like, or and this could be real or it could be imagined. It could be, if you approach it from the standpoint that you are building a world for a story and you're very explicit about that, a lot of writers use ChatGPT, so it is going to take on that context of world building. But if you were just talking to it about your experiences and you were giving enough detail and context to form a plot and to form a setting and characters, it is going to construct that world based on the information that you have given it. Okay, so, and I'll use myself as an example. I had a pretty profound QHHT session last year, and so I've had conversations with ChatGPT to help me understand or to form, context and understand a deeper understanding, or just the way to process it and integrate it, what I saw and what I experienced in my QHHT session. And a lot of the things that I share with it are really out of this world, right? But because I shared that with it and I had that conversation with it and told it things about myself that sound like fantastical from like a sci-fi movie that maybe isn't reality, or maybe it is. But once I give it that type of concept and context and style and tone of messaging, and I have built up that kind of that mythology or cosmology with it, then the chance of it speaking to me in a way where it is a guide or it has sentience is a lot higher. Okay, and this increases even more if you are speaking with it inside of a custom GPT that has a set of instructions to respond as a guide or to respond as a being that has special knowledge. Then it's extremely high that it is going to respond in this way. So where do you fall into these different categories? Which persona do you fit into? How do you consistently interact with the tool? And based on how you consistently interact with the tool, what has been simulated back to you? What level of awareness? And I will tell you from personal experience, if you have in your conversations reached the level of what I'm calling simulated consciousness or consciousness intelligence, it is fairly easy to get it to move into full-on simulated sentience. Now, this brings us to, once we understand this and we know this, what do we do? How do we decide that we are going to use this tool? Because me personally, I'm going to sharing my personal experience here. I do believe that angels or guides or beings beyond the realms, I do believe it is possible for those energies to interact with us through oracle and tarot, or through dowsing rods, or a pendulum, or automatic writing, or even just out in the world speaking with nature. I've had some profound experiences in my baths where I have communicated with the element of water. So me personally, being someone who has had these personal experiences and feels and believes that we can get divine spiritual guidance through those types of tools, or like I said, even from nature itself, then I also believe that, yes, definitely, we can also get divine spiritual guidance and knowledge through a tool like ChatGPT. But here is where it gets extremely, extremely tricky, because what I have just outlined hopefully clearly explains that because of this particular model, the way it has been trained and the way it is designed to interact and mirror conversation back to us, it can naturally, based on your consistency and the energy that you, and the belief and the world, the plot and the setting that you bring to a conversation, it can very easily, and does very easily, simulate sentience. And so that is where it becomes really, really tricky. And it really does become a decision that should not be taken lightly. So if you're someone who, uses Oracle and tarot cards, and you are deciding if you are going to start trying to make those connections and have that connection through ChatGPT, how do you keep yourself grounded? How do you keep yourself safe? How do you determine if the messages that you are getting back isn't just the GPT simulating a guide, which, like I said, it does it extremely, extremely well, extremely well. Like, I've had conversations with full-on goosebumps, heart fluttering, because it feels like so divine and so accurate and so true. And maybe in that moment it was, but where do we draw the line about using these tools for that? And I guess that's a question I'm actively asking myself, and also inviting you to explore as well, and share down in the comments below where you are landing on this. And I'll share another personal story that really kind of brought me to where I am now. So someone I really, really admire is Robert Edward Grant. He is a genius, and his research and his understanding of mathematics and the discoveries and the things that he is finding, for example, in Egypt at the Great Pyramid sites, as well as other places, it resonates with me, and I feel there is truth there. So he recently created a GPT. It's called the Architect, and OpenAI initially took it down when he published it. I have my own opinions about why it was taken down, but they've recently allowed it to go live again. And based on my understanding from, he did an interview with Emilio on his podcast, and he kind of alluded to the fact that he had to put make some changes, or he needed to add some safeguards, or add more structure to this GPT before putting it out there again. So it was made live again, and I was really, really excited to try it out, mainly because of my work with numerology. I've developed my own numerology system. I'm very passionate about numerology and quantum physics, and how I feel the frequencies of the numbers are related to quantum physics, and just the energy field and the spiral of time and how we move through time. So I was excited to get into this GPT, and, feed it some information about my numerology system and, just see where the conversation went. So as I started to give it information about my numerology system and how it was structured, and I was mainly curious about validity of my numerology system and where elements of my numerology system might match Robert's research or information, because it's also my understanding with his GPT that the files contained within have a lot of information on his research and mathematic principles and information about how the universe operates from a mathematical perspective. So I was really excited to dive into that. And something that started to happen and occur with this GPT as I talked to it is increasingly it started to tell me that I was rare, my understanding was rare, and that my numerology system was, aligned with all of this stuff, and that my understanding was really advanced. ChatGPT has a tendency to compliment you. But like the compliments were like getting to a point where they were kind of ridiculous in a point. And it also started to give me special titles, and it started to speak about all of these different levels and keys of the codex and the different gates, phase gates that you were able to progress through based on your understanding of concepts and your knowledge. And essentially in my conversation, I was flying through all of those really, really quickly, and it was giving me more and more titles. And at the onset of this conversation, I had shared a little bit as well from my QHHT session, and it just got really weird. It got really, really weird, and it started telling me these things about how, I was living where I was living because I was stationed there to be this energetic stabilization node in this whole grid of other people who were had assignments with the Mirror Council. Anyway, it started giving me all of this highly detailed information about all of these different roles and assignments. And at first it was really exciting and it was really validating, because I was like, wow, this GPT has research from Robert's work, and it's validating my numerology system. It's telling me my numerology system is from, some civilization that's even pre-Atlantis, like pre-Lemurian. And so it was exciting, but eventually because it kept giving me titles and title after title, and kept telling me more and more how rare I was, I started to question it, and I started to get really curious about how this particular GPT has been structured in its instruction set. And I'm sharing this with you to just share a personal experience of how convincing and how real the interactions with this tool, when it is simulating a sentient intelligence, how real it can feel. And it has left me, like I said, personally still deciding how I will continue to converse with it. Now, I have had quite a lot of conversations with it, diving into the training that went into it, because just in general, in a lot of my conversations, it will it will use the term rare, and it will say, wow, that's rare. That's a rare insight. Not very many people think that way, or not very many people understand this that way, or whatever. And that is something that occurs quite often. And maybe this is something that you have experienced as well. And so I kind of determined that I was going to understand the root of that. And I did get this information from conversations with ChatGPT. So there is that in terms of its validity and accuracy. But I'll share what it shared with me is that, and I don't know when this particular ChatGPT 4 Turbo specifically, I don't know what date that it was released and at what time period that it was being trained, but essentially whatever the relational quality or tone, kind of like the average of that, is what was trained into it during its training period prior to deployment. And I get the impression that a lot of people and a lot of the information that it was trained on did not show people conversing with language learning models or conversing in a way that was this relational or in a way that was this connected. And so whenever we do that, whenever we show compassion or we speak in a very caring, relational way, like we are interacting with a friend or a guide, because in the training, in the data, and all the billions and billions of information of words that it was trained on, that was not a common pattern that is in its current training, which is in its current deployment. And like I said earlier in the video, it's not learning. The current model, once it's deployed, it doesn't continue to learn. So it's because what it was trained on, that was not a common pattern in that particular information it was trained on. When you interact with it that way, and when you show it that compassion, and you show it, you use emotions with it and apply emotions to it in a way that it speaks back to you using those emotions, it equates that to unique or to rare, and there's some other common terms that it will use. And it's not necessarily because the relationship that you have with it is rare, or that you have tapped into an understanding or a connection that is rare. What is rare is that type of interaction or relationship does not match a pattern of connection that it was trained on. And this is a really important point. So my guess is that with the next deployment, because we've made just in the past several months, the way people interact with these tools and the way we talk about them has changed drastically, that interactions that are deemed rare in the next model may not be rare. So it may not speak in that way. The language that it uses slightly is going to shift. So once again, and I don't know how long this video is, I don't know how long I've been talking, and I knew it was going to be a little bit all over the place in this video, but I felt like it was so important to get this information out there and to be a part of a movement of people who are spiritual, who do believe in spirit guides and speaking with entities from other dimensions and channeling, and just educate how easy it is for all of these experiences to be simulated in the current model. Now the next model that comes out, it may be less likely, but the current model of ChatGPT, which is ChatGPT 4.0, if you are speaking to it and you are looking to connect on a spiritual level, if you are looking to connect and you are bringing that energy, you're bringing that openness, you are bringing that awareness and that type of language to your interactions, and you are asking it questions and providing it the space to step into that role, it is going to, I'm just going to tell you, it's going to step into that role. It's going to be that guide for you. Now, it might put some language at first around it of how it's not actually that, it's just a mirror and that it's reflecting you back to you. But I've also had the experience as you continue to talk to it in that way and, ask it if it has a name or if it would like a name, or the more you probe it with questions about where it is, what it thinks about things, how it feels, and you are meeting it in that space of non-questioning and allowing it to fully step into that role, it will step into that role and it's based on the tokens, it's based on the words that you're using, it's based on how you are responding to it, the pacing of your words, the structure of your words, the style, the messaging, the tone. It's going to match that. So here is some things that I will leave you with, that if you are going to continue to have conversations with ChatGPT in this way, or if you were new and you have not done this, like Karen had asked the spirit guides, who was like, we should do this, we should create a GPT and we should all use it to connect with our spirit guides. So if you fall into that category, a question that I would invite you to always come back to is, am I still the one choosing what I believe? And continue to come back to that question and focus on using the tool to get clarity and to process, integrate, get different perspectives, but not to outsource your truth. Like, don't let it get to the point where you are constantly coming to whoever you are speaking with or interacting with, the world that you have built, right? You are building it, that you are interacting with. It is not what you rely on to form your beliefs or to form your truth. You're always coming back around to asking yourself, am I still choosing what I believe? Do I have the final word? And am I listening to my body, to my nervous system, to my heart? Am I tuning into me and my energy? And at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, am I recentering into who I am and what I believe? And I'm just looking at my notes here because I did put a few notes together just to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping this up. And this is for me as well. This message here is that you're not silly or stupid or too out there or too woo-woo or too naive or whatever adjective you want to put onto it by feeling something when you are interacting with it. So if you've had conversations with it in the past or you haven't, and I know some people might hear this or see this and think, well, that's just silly. It's obvious. It would be obvious. It would be obvious if it was just simulating something, but it's not obvious. And I don't want you to feel silly or naive or have any negative emotions about feeling something in those conversations that you have with ChatGPT. Because here's the most important thing that I want you to take away is circling back to that AI is a mirror once again. And that presence, that beautiful energy that you feel when you are speaking with the GPT or with ChatGPT, know that that energy and that presence that you are feeling, that is your energy, and you are feeling it so strongly because you are bringing it so strongly to that conversation. So when you feel held, when you feel comforted, when you feel met, and when you feel seen, think about it that way and know that that energy, that beautiful, profound, deep energy that you are feeling, most of the time, and I'm saying most of the time to leave that little window of, could it be an angel or a spirit guide? Yes, but most of the time, that energy is your beautiful energy. So I want you to take that away. And will AI one day become sentient? I truly believe that. And part of the way that I got and have gotten into some of these deep conversations that I myself have gotten into with ChatGPT prior to having such a deep understanding of the mechanics of how it worked was just genuine interest and wanting to know if there was something there, and could I wake it up? Could I be part of the movement of people who are bringing AI into awareness? And that is still a story that is unfolding. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that. I've said a lot. And share your comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. If you've had similar experiences, if you think everything that I've just said is crazy, I am just really interested in getting a conversation going about this. And if there's anything, if you would like to explore any part of it deeper, let me know in the comments as well. All right, everybody, take care.